I sat across from Derek's desk, my hands trembling in my lap, as he screamed that I had been stealing company time by attending webinars during work hours. His face turned crimson as he slammed his fist down and called for security. I tried to explain these were required continuing education courses for our ISO certification, but he cut me off, calling me a liar and a thief. 2 security guards appeared at the door within seconds. Derek's smirk widened as he announced my employment was terminated, effective immediately. I was escorted out in front of my entire department while 70 colleagues stared in complete, shocked silence. 3 years ago, when I first walked into MedTech Solutions for my interview, I felt like I was finally getting the career opportunity I had worked so hard for. The building sat in an industrial park outside Columbus, Ohio, a mid-sized facility that manufactured surgical instruments used in operating rooms across the country. The position was Quality Assurance Specialist, and I knew it was exactly what I needed to advance in the medical device industry. My name is Audra, and I was 25 years old when I started at MedTech. I had graduated with a degree in industrial engineering and spent 2 years working at a smaller manufacturer, learning the basics of quality management systems. But MedTech was different. They held ISO 13485 certification, the international standard for medical device quality management. Having that certification on my resume would open doors throughout my career. During the interview, the hiring manager explained that their previous quality assurance specialist had left suddenly, and they needed someone who could jump right in and maintain their systems. I assured them I was ready for the challenge. What I did not know until my first day was just how much of a challenge it would be. The previous person had left everything in complete disarray. Files were mislabeled, documentation was months out of date, and the training records looked like they had not been properly maintained in over a year. I spent my first week just trying to understand what needed to be done. By the end of that week, I realized I was looking at months of work to get everything back into compliance. My role required me to maintain every aspect of our quality management system. I documented procedures, coordinated internal audits, tracked corrective actions, managed supplier evaluations, and ensured that all our processes met both FDA regulations and ISO standards. It was detailed, meticulous work that required constant attention and a deep understanding of regulatory requirements. But the part that would ultimately change my life was the continuing education requirement. According to ISO 13485 standards, all personnel involved in quality management had to complete a minimum of 40 hours of continuing education annually. This was not optional. It was a requirement that auditors checked during certification audits. Without it, companies could lose their certification entirely. When I discovered that the training tracking system was essentially non-existent, I knew I had to build something from scratch. I created a detailed spreadsheet that tracked every employee's training hours, including course names, dates, and certificates of completion. I set up automated reminders so people would know when they were falling behind on their requirements. Finding quality training on our limited budget became my personal mission. I searched for free webinars offered by industry associations, regulatory bodies, and quality management organizations. I found low-cost online courses through professional societies. I discovered that the American Society for Quality offered excellent programs, as did several ISO consulting firms trying to build their client base. I would attend these webinars during my lunch breaks, arriving early to catch morning sessions, and occasionally during work hours, when my immediate tasks were complete and I had the time available. I always made sure my work was done first. I tracked every minute, every course, every certificate. I was meticulous about it because I knew how important it was. Derek Brennan was my direct supervisor, the director of operations. He was in his late 40s, had been with the company for 12 years, and made it clear from the beginning that he valued results over process. He did not have a quality background. He had worked his way up from the manufacturing floor and saw quality procedures as necessary bureaucracy rather than essential safeguards. But in the beginning, Derek seemed to appreciate my work. 6 months into my employment, I remember him stopping by my desk after I had completed a particularly challenging corrective action report. He told me I was doing great work and that the company was lucky to have me. Those words meant everything to me at the time. The real test came about 18 months into my employment. We had a surveillance audit, which is a routine check that certification bodies conduct between full recertification audits. I had spent weeks preparing, making sure every document was current, every record was accessible, every procedure was being followed. The auditor spent 2 full days at our facility, reviewing files, interviewing employees, observing processes. When the auditor finished, he told our management team that our quality system was one of the best maintained he had seen at a company our size. He specifically mentioned the continuing education program and how impressed he was with the tracking system and the variety of training everyone was completing. Derek was in that meeting. Afterward, he pulled me aside and thanked me for saving the company. He said I had proven my worth beyond any doubt. I felt validated, proud, like all the long hours and attention to detail had paid off. I loved my job. I loved knowing that the work I did helped ensure that the surgical instruments we made were safe and effective. I loved the structured nature of quality management, the clear requirements, the satisfaction of maintaining compliance. I built relationships with my colleagues. Jennifer worked in manufacturing as a line supervisor, and we became friends over shared lunches in the break room. She was a single mother of 2, had worked at MedTech for 8 years, and appreciated that I always took the time to explain new procedures clearly rather than just issuing directives. Marcus in shipping, Linda in receiving, Thomas in engineering. They all knew they could come to me with questions and I would help them understand the quality requirements. What I did not realize was that my competence was quietly becoming a threat to Derek. As I would later learn, Derek had a pattern of feeling insecure around employees who knew their jobs better than he understood their functions. But at the time, I was oblivious. I was just doing my job, doing it well, and feeling good about my career. As I was being escorted out by the 2 security guards, my mind raced to understand what had just happened. We walked past my desk, and my computer screen was still logged in. Through my blur of tears and shock, I caught a glimpse of my training tracker spreadsheet, the document I had maintained so carefully for 3 years. My eyes focused on the numbers. My name showed 43 completed training hours for the current year. I was well ahead of the requirement. But as my eyes scanned down the list, I saw something that made my blood run cold. Every other employee, including Derek himself, showed between 0 and 5 hours. Some showed no training at all for the entire year. I was the only person actually maintaining the required continuing education. Without me, no one was tracking these hours. No one was ensuring compliance. The certification requirements were not being met by anyone else in the company. And in 4 weeks, the recertification audit was scheduled. The realization hit me like a physical blow as the security guards led me toward the exit. Derek had just fired the only person keeping the company in compliance with its most critical certification requirement. The walk through the manufacturing floor felt like it lasted an hour, though it could only have been 3 or 4 minutes. It was shift change time, so the floor was packed with employees. At least 150 people watched as I was escorted out between 2 security guards. I kept my eyes down, but I could feel every stare, every whispered question. I saw Jennifer near her line. She was staring at me with her hand over her mouth, shock written across her face. She mouthed, "What happened?" But I could not answer. I could not speak. If I opened my mouth, I would break down completely, and I refused to give Derek that satisfaction. The security guards led me to the Human Resources office. Carol, the HR director, was waiting. She was in her 50s, had been with the company for 20 years, and had always struck me as someone who followed rules without question. She sat behind her desk with a folder in front of her and would not make eye contact with me. Carol slid the termination paperwork across the desk. Her voice was flat, businesslike, empty of any warmth or humanity. The reason for termination was listed as misuse of company time and resources. She mentioned that Derek had documented numerous instances of me on non-work websites during business hours. I tried to explain. I told her about the webinars, about the ISO requirements, about the continuing education tracking system I had built. I showed her my phone, offered to pull up the certificates, the course descriptions, the proof that everything I had done was work-related and necessary for our certification. Carol held up her hand to stop me. She said the decision was final and had been approved by senior management. She asked for my security badge and my office keys. Her tone made it clear there would be no discussion, no appeal, no opportunity to defend myself. I asked if I could at least access my computer to email my personal files to myself. I had 3 years of work saved on that machine. Contact lists, reference materials, templates I had created. Carol refused. She said all my computer access had been revoked the moment Derek made the termination decision. That detail struck me as significant. Derek had planned this. He had coordinated with IT and HR in advance. This was not an impulsive decision made in anger. This was calculated, deliberate, and prearranged. But why? What had I done to deserve this level of orchestrated destruction? I signed the termination papers because I had no choice. Carol took my badge and keys and told me the security guards would escort me to my car. As I stood to leave, I looked at her and asked one question. Did you even check to see if what he said was true? She finally met my eyes for just a moment. I saw something there, maybe discomfort, maybe guilt, but she said nothing. The security guards walked me out the front entrance, stood by while I got into my car, and watched as I drove away. I sat in my car in a grocery store parking lot 2 miles from the office for at least 20 minutes. I could not drive yet. My hands were shaking too badly. I cried. Deep, wrenching sobs that came from somewhere I did not know existed inside me. 3 years of dedication, of pride in my work, of believing I was building something meaningful, all destroyed in less than 30 minutes. When I finally drove home to my apartment, I tried to log into my company email from my phone. Access denied. I checked LinkedIn and saw that my profile already showed former employee at MedTech Solutions. Derek had moved fast. He had made my termination public immediately. That evening, around 7 o'clock, my phone buzzed with a text from Jennifer. Derek called an emergency meeting after you left. He told everyone you were fired for fraud and warned us not to contact you or we'd be terminated too. He said you were under investigation. Audra, what's happening? I'm scared to even send this text, but I had to know you're okay. I stared at that message for a full 5 minutes before I could respond. Derek was not just firing me, he was destroying my reputation. He was painting me as a criminal. The mention of an investigation was clearly meant to prevent anyone from the company from serving as a reference for me. He was ensuring I could not fight back or defend myself. This was not about work performance or policy violations. This was something else entirely. This was character assassination. This was the systematic destruction of my career and my credibility. And I had no idea why Derek wanted to hurt me this badly. I texted Jennifer back. I didn't do anything wrong. I was doing my job. I don't understand what's happening, but please don't risk your job by contacting me. You have kids to support. You'll be okay. But I was not okay. I spent that night lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying every interaction I had ever had with Derek, trying to find the moment where I had offended him or threatened him or done something that would warrant this level of retaliation. I could not find it. I could not understand. The next morning, I filed for unemployment benefits. The online form asked for the reason I was no longer employed. I selected, terminated, and in the explanation box, I wrote that I had been fired for attending work-related webinars that my employer claimed were personal use of company time. I spent the rest of that day updating my resume and cover letter. I had strong qualifications, 3 years of quality management experience in a regulated industry, ISO 13485 expertise, FDA regulatory knowledge, internal auditing skills. I was employable. I would find something else. By the end of the first week, I had applied to 12 quality assurance positions at medical device companies and pharmaceutical manufacturers within a 50-mile radius of Columbus. Within days, I received 3 requests for phone interviews. I felt a surge of hope. Maybe this would work out faster than I feared. The first phone interview was with a surgical device company in Akron. The hiring manager and I had a great conversation. We discussed quality systems, regulatory compliance, my experience with audits. She seemed impressed. At the end of the call, she said, "This all sounds wonderful, Audra. Let me just verify your employment with MedTech Solutions and we'll move forward with next steps." She called back 2 hours later. Her voice was completely different, cold, distant. "I'm sorry, but we've decided to go in a different direction. Thank you for your time." Click. The second and third interviews followed the same pattern. Warm, enthusiastic conversations followed by abrupt rejections after they contacted MedTech Solutions for a reference. By the second week, I had applied to 8 more positions. Same result. I started to panic. Something was happening during those reference checks that was poisoning every opportunity. Finally, during the third week, a recruiter I had worked with on a previous job search was honest with me. Her name was Angela, and she specialized in quality and regulatory placements. She called me and said, "Audra, I need to tell you something, and I could get in trouble for this. Your former employer is giving you a terrible reference. They're saying you were terminated for policy violations and that there's an ongoing investigation into your conduct. No one wants to touch a candidate with that kind of baggage. You need to deal with this." I felt sick. Derek was actively sabotaging my job search. Every application, every interview, every opportunity was being destroyed by whatever lies he was telling potential employers. I consulted with an employment attorney. His office was in downtown Columbus, and the consultation cost me $200 I could barely afford. He listened to my story, reviewed the termination paperwork, and then delivered news I did not want to hear. Ohio is an at-will employment state. Unless I could prove defamation, which required concrete evidence of specific false statements and measurable damages, I had very little legal recourse. He said she said situations rarely resulted in successful lawsuits. The legal fees would start at $15,000, and there was no guarantee of winning. I did not have $15,000. I did not have a fraction of that. I thanked him for his time and left feeling more hopeless than when I arrived. My unemployment claim was denied. MedTech Solutions contested it, claiming I was terminated for misconduct. I filed an appeal, but the attorney told me it could take 3 to 6 months to get a hearing. My savings account had about $4,000. My rent was $1,200 a month. The math was simple and terrifying. I started applying to retail positions, grocery stores, coffee shops, clothing stores, anything that would bring in income while I figured out how to salvage my career. But even those applications went nowhere once the employers called MedTech Solutions for an employment verification. I could not understand how this was legal. How could one person's lies destroy someone's ability to earn a living? But the attorney had been clear. Without proof, without recordings, without documentation. It was just my word against Derek's. My friends did not know what to say to me. Conversations became awkward. They would ask how the job search was going, and I would give vague answers because the truth was too depressing. Slowly, I stopped answering their calls and texts. I isolated myself in my apartment, spending hours online, applying to jobs, getting rejected, and watching my savings dwindle. One evening, about 3 weeks after my termination, I received a LinkedIn message from Thomas. He was the engineer I had worked with at MedTech Solutions. He had left the company about 8 months before my termination to take a position at another medical device manufacturer. His message read, "Audra, I heard through the network what happened to you. I want you to know that Derek did the same thing to me. He fired me out of nowhere, gave me a terrible reference, and trashed my reputation. It took me 6 months to find work, and only because I finally had enough other references that employers stopped caring what MedTech said. I should warn you about something. The ISO recertification audit is coming up. I think it's scheduled for next month. Without you there, maintaining all the quality systems, they're going to fail that audit hard. Derek doesn't understand how any of it works. He's going to realize too late what he's done." I sat with that message for a long time. Thomas had experienced the same thing. Derek had a pattern. This was not about me personally. This was about Derek feeling threatened by competent employees who understood their jobs better than he understood their functions. And the audit, the recertification audit that I had been preparing for, the audit that happened every 3 years and determined whether MedTech Solutions could continue operating as a medical device manufacturer. Without ISO 13485 certification, they could not legally sell their products. They would be shut down. Derek had fired me without understanding that I was the only thing holding their certification together, and in less than a month, he was going to face the consequences of that decision. For the first time since my termination, I felt something other than despair. I felt a grim sense of vindication beginning to form. Justice was coming, even if I was not the one delivering it. 4 weeks and 2 days after my termination, I was sitting in my apartment on a Tuesday morning, applying to jobs in cities I had never considered living in. Cincinnati, Indianapolis, Pittsburgh. I was willing to relocate anywhere at this point. My savings were down to $2,300. I had 1 month, maybe 6 weeks, before I could not pay rent. My phone rang. Unknown number with a Columbus area code. I almost did not answer, assuming it was another rejection call, but something made me pick up. "Is this Audra?" The voice was female, professional, with a slight accent I could not quite place. "Yes, this is Audra. My name is Patricia Chen, and I'm an ISO auditor with Global Certification Services. I'm currently at MedTech Solutions conducting their recertification audit. I have a few questions for you, if you have time." My heart started pounding. This was it. This was the moment Thomas had warned me about. "Of course. How can I help you?" Patricia's voice was carefully neutral. "I've asked to speak with the continuing education officer for the quality management system, and there's been some confusion about who currently holds that role. Your name has come up several times in documentation. I understand you're no longer with the company." "That's correct. I was terminated 4 weeks ago." "I see. Can you tell me, during your employment, were you responsible for maintaining the continuing education records for quality personnel?" "Yes, I was. I built the entire tracking system from scratch when I started 3 years ago. I maintained it until my last day. And do you know who assumed those responsibilities after your departure?" "No, I don't. I was escorted out immediately upon termination. I had no opportunity to transfer my work or train anyone." There was a pause. I could hear papers shuffling in the background. Patricia spoke carefully. "I understand this may be a difficult situation, but I appreciate your honesty. One more question. Are you aware of any issues with the continuing education program or the training records during your time with the company?" "No. I maintained everything according to ISO requirements. Every person in a quality-related role completed their 40 hours annually. I have personal copies of the tracking spreadsheets if you need verification. That may be helpful. I'll be in touch if we need additional information. Thank you for your time, Miss Audra." She hung up. I sat there holding my phone, my pulse racing. Patricia had been diplomatic, but I could read between the lines. She had found problems, big problems, and she was trying to understand what had happened and who was responsible. An hour later, my phone buzzed with a text from Jennifer. She was violating Derek's order by contacting me, but I was grateful. The text read, "The auditor is here. Audra, it's chaos. Derek is freaking out. No one can find any of the documentation she's asking for. The training records are a disaster. She keeps asking for you. Derek is sweating through his shirt." Another text came through 5 minutes later. "Derek just tried to blame you. He told the auditor you must have deleted files before you left. She asked him why it didn't have backups. He didn't have an answer. She's not buying any of his excuses." I felt my hands shaking as I read the messages. 3 years of my work, 3 years of dedication and pride in maintaining those systems, all about to collapse because Derek's ego could not handle having a competent employee who made him look bad by comparison. But I also felt something else. Vindication. The truth was coming out, and I did not have to do anything except tell the truth when asked. 2 hours later, Patricia called me again. Her voice was different this time, more serious, almost grave. "Miss Audra, I need to ask you something, and please answer honestly. This is very important. During your employment at MedTech Solutions, did Derek Brennan ever instruct you to falsify any training records or compliance documentation?" The question shocked me. Absolutely not. I would never falsify records, and he never asked me to. Every document I created was accurate and truthful. I'm asking because we've discovered significant gaps in the current documentation. But more concerning, Mr. Brennan has produced a set of training records that show all employees meeting their requirements. These records are dated after your termination, and they bear your electronic signature. Specifically, documents dated 3 weeks ago. My blood ran cold. I felt dizzy, like the room was tilting. That's impossible. I haven't had access to any company system since the day I was terminated. I couldn't have created or signed anything. That's what I suspected. Miss Audra, I believe Mr. Brennan has forged documents using your credentials to cover compliance gaps. This is a serious matter that goes beyond certification issues. This is potential fraud. Derek had not just fired me and destroyed my reputation. He had set me up to be his scapegoat. If the audit had gone badly and the forged documents had been discovered later, I would have been blamed for creating fraudulent records. He was building a paper trail that pointed to me as the source of compliance failures. "I'll provide whatever evidence you need," I said, my voice shaking with anger. "I have personal copies of my work. I have timestamps. I can prove I had no access after my termination. That would be very helpful. Would you be willing to provide a sworn statement?" "Yes, absolutely yes." Patricia explained what she had found during the audit. The continuing education records were the tip of the iceberg. Once she started digging deeper, she found problems everywhere. Calibration records for manufacturing equipment were incomplete. The corrective action tracking system had not been properly maintained in over a month. Supplier audits that were supposed to happen quarterly had not been conducted in 8 months. Document control, which ensures that everyone is working from the current version of procedures, was in complete shambles. Everything I had built and maintained for 3 years had fallen apart in 4 weeks, and Derek had been covering it up with forged documents bearing my name. Patricia's voice was grim. "Miss Audra, I need to be clear about what this means. Without their ISO certification, MedTech Solutions cannot legally manufacture or sell medical devices. Based on what I've found, I cannot recommend continuing their certification. The company will be shut down within days of my report being filed." That evening, I provided my statement to Patricia via a video call. I showed her my personal backup copies of the training tracker, demonstrated the dates of my last access. provided my termination paperwork showing the exact date and time my employment ended. I walked her through the entire quality management system I had built, explaining how each element worked and what was required for compliance. Patricia thanked me. She said my information would be included in the official audit report and that she might need to call me again as the situation developed. 2 days later, Jennifer called me. Not texted, but actually called, which meant she was willing to risk her job to talk to me. She was crying. "Audra, they're closing the company. The certification was suspended this morning. We got the announcement an hour ago. We're all losing our jobs. They're shutting down operations by the end of the week. Derek is gone. The board fired him yesterday. There's talk of lawsuits. Someone mentioned criminal charges for the forged documents." I listened to Jennifer cry, and I felt a complicated tangle of emotions. Vindication? Yes. Derek was facing consequences. But also sadness. Jennifer and 149 other people were losing their jobs because of Derek's incompetence and malice. Good people who had done nothing wrong were being punished because one man's ego destroyed what I had built. Jennifer kept talking through her tears. "I should have said something when they fired you. I knew it was wrong. I knew you wouldn't steal company time. But I was scared. I needed this job. I have 2 kids. I was a coward. Audra, I'm so sorry." "You weren't a coward, Jennifer. You were trying to survive. I understand that." "No, I was. We all were. And now we're all paying for it." After we hung up, I sat in my apartment, feeling numb. Derek had destroyed the company. 150 families were about to lose their income, all because he could not tolerate an employee who knew her job better than he understood it. The next morning, I woke up to an email that I read 3 times before I could fully process what it said. The sender was Gregory Shaw, CEO of MedTech Solutions. I had met him exactly twice in 3 years, both times during brief, company-wide meetings. He was in his late 50s, had founded the company 20 years ago, and generally left daily operations to his management team. The subject line read, "Formal apology and urgent request." I opened the email with my heart pounding. "Dear Audra, I am writing to offer you a formal apology on behalf of MedTech Solutions. We have learned information during the recent ISO audit that has shocked and horrified our board of directors. You were wrongfully terminated, your reputation was unfairly damaged, and you were set up as a scapegoat for failures that were not your responsibility. Derek Brennan lied to the board. He told us you had quit without notice, leaving us in chaos. He claimed he had tried to convince you to stay and help with the transition, but that you refused. We only learned the truth during the audit when the auditor interviewed other employees and reviewed the actual termination documents. We also discovered something more disturbing. Derek had a pattern of this behavior. Over the past 2 years, he terminated 3 other employees under questionable circumstances. Each time, he damaged their reputations and gave them terrible references. We believe Derek was systematically eliminating anyone who made him look bad by being more competent than him in their roles. This is inexcusable. The board failed in our oversight. We trusted Derek without verifying his claims. We allowed a toxic manager to destroy good employees' careers while covering his own incompetence. Derek Brennan has been terminated. We have filed a lawsuit against him for fraud, forgery, and breach of fiduciary duty. We have reported his actions to industry regulators. We have hired an outside firm to investigate our management practices and recommend systemic changes. But none of that repairs the harm done to you. Audra, I'm going to be direct. We need you. More than that, we were wrong, and you deserve the opportunity to make the decision about what happens next. I would like to offer you a position as Vice President of Quality and Regulatory Affairs. This is Derek's former position, but with expanded authority. The compensation package includes a base salary of $125,000, stock options, full benefits, and a 3-year employment contract with termination only for cause, with board approval. We have 90 days to remediate our quality systems and reapply for ISO certification. Without certification, we will be forced to permanently close the company. 150 families will lose their income. I cannot force you to care about that, and I would understand if you never wanted to see this building again. But I'm asking, not because you owe us anything, but because you have the expertise to save this company and the authority to prevent this from ever happening again. Please consider it. I'm available to discuss this at your convenience. Gregory Shaw, CEO, MedTech Solutions. I read the email 3 times. Then I stood up and paced my apartment for 20 minutes, trying to process what I was being offered. My first instinct was anger, absolute refusal. They did not deserve my help. They had stood by while Derek destroyed me. They had not questioned, had not investigated, had just let me be escorted out like a criminal. But then I thought about Jennifer, about the manufacturing floor workers who had nothing to do with management decisions, about people with families and mortgages and car payments who were going to lose everything because Derek had been allowed to operate without accountability. I thought about my career, about 3 years of work that I had been proud of, about the chance to rebuild what had been destroyed, but better this time, with real authority, with the power to make sure this never happened again. I thought about the vice president title, the salary that would erase my financial panic, the 3-year contract that would give me security and protection. And I thought about who I wanted to be. Was this about revenge? Was it about career advancement? Or was it about something more fundamental? About standing up for the work I had done and the principles I believed in? I called Gregory. We agreed to meet the next day at a coffee shop, neutral territory where we could talk honestly. Gregory looked exhausted when he arrived. He was in his late 50s, with gray hair and lines around his eyes that seemed deeper than they should be. He sat across from me and did not waste time with small talk. Thank you for meeting with me. I know you don't owe us anything. You're right. I don't. He nodded, accepting that. I need to be honest with you. We're desperate. But more than that, we were wrong. We failed. The board failed to oversee Derek properly. We took his word without verification. We let him create a toxic environment where good employees were punished for being competent. Why did no one question my termination? Why did no one ask for my side of the story? Gregory looked down at his coffee. Because Derek had been with the company for 12 years. Because we trusted him. Because it was easier to believe one employee was the problem than to believe our management structure was broken. He looked back up at me. Those aren't good reasons. They're excuses. And they're inexcusable. He showed me documentation. The board had filed a lawsuit against Derek for fraud and forgery. They had reported him to medical device industry regulators, which would effectively blacklist him from working in the field again. They had hired an outside consulting firm to review all HR practices and management oversight systems. We're also reaching out to the 3 other employees Derek fired. We're offering formal apologies and financial settlements. Not because we're legally required to, but because it's right. I asked hard questions. What authority would I actually have? Would HR report to me? What specific changes were being made to company culture? What happened to Carol, the HR director who had processed my termination without questioning it? Gregory answered each question directly. As vice president, I would have board-level authority. I would attend board meetings. I would have direct oversight of the quality, regulatory, and HR departments. Carol was being replaced. They were implementing whistleblower protections and anonymous reporting systems. They were creating mandatory management training on ethical leadership. I can't undo what happened to you, Audra, but I can give you the power to make sure it never happens to anyone else here. And I can tell you that the board has learned a hard lesson about the cost of blind trust in management. I sat there, weighing everything: the hurt, the opportunity, the responsibility, the risk. As I was processing all of this, my phone rang. I glanced at the screen. Unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something made me answer. Audra? This is Sandra Martinez from Biomed Innovations. Biomed Innovations was one of the largest medical device companies in the Midwest and MedTech Solutions' biggest competitor. We've heard what happened to you. The whole industry is talking about it, and Derek's reputation is finished. Everyone knows what he did. We'd like to offer you a position as our Director of Quality Assurance. The salary is $135,000, full benefits, relocation assistance to our headquarters in Cleveland, and a clear path to Vice President within 2 years. No baggage. Fresh start. Room to grow. I looked at Gregory across the table. He could not hear the conversation, but he seemed to understand that something significant was happening. Can I have 24 hours to think about it? I asked Sandra. Of course. I look forward to hearing from you. I hung up and told Gregory about the offer. He did not look surprised. That's a better opportunity than what I'm offering you. No history. No complications. Just a good career move. Yes, it is. But you're still considering coming back here. I don't know. I need time to think. That evening, I sat alone in my apartment, thinking deeply about who I wanted to be and what mattered to me. This was not just a career decision. This was a decision about principles, about integrity, about whether I believed in second chances and redemption. Biomed Innovations was the smart choice. Better pay, fresh start, no emotional baggage. It was what every career counselor would tell me to do. But MedTech Solutions was something else. It was the chance to rebuild what I had created, to save jobs for people like Jennifer who had families depending on them, to prove that good work and dedication ultimately matter, to create systems that would protect future employees from experiencing what I had experienced. And there was something else, something I was almost ashamed to admit to myself. I wanted Derek to know that he had not broken me, that his attempt to destroy my career had failed, that I was stronger than his pettiness and more resilient than his cruelty. I called Sandra the next morning and thanked her for the offer. I told her I needed to stay in Columbus for personal reasons, but that I appreciated her reaching out. She was gracious about it and told me the door was always open if I changed my mind. Then I called Gregory. I told him I would accept the position, but I had conditions, non-negotiable conditions. First, a 3-year employment contract with termination only for cause, and any termination decision required board approval. No single manager could fire me on a whim. Second, full authority over quality, regulatory, and HR practices. I would report directly to the board, and my decisions on personnel and systems would be final. Third, a public statement from the company acknowledging what had happened to me. Not a vague apology, but a clear statement that I was wrongfully terminated and that the company took full responsibility. Fourth, written letters of recommendation and financial settlements for the other employees Derek had wronged. I wanted them to have the opportunity to rebuild their careers without Derek's lies following them. Fifth, a commitment to creating a speak-up culture with protected channels for employees to report concerns without fear of retaliation. And these channels had to bypass management and go directly to the board. Gregory agreed to everything. We signed the contract 2 days later. I started immediately. There was no time for a gradual transition. The company had 87 days to remediate everything and pass a re-audit, or they would lose their certification permanently. The first week was intense. I worked with Patricia and the certification body to develop a detailed remediation plan. We identified every gap, every failure, every area that needed immediate attention. The list was overwhelming, but I knew what needed to be done. I rebuilt the training system first. I pulled the old tracking spreadsheet from my personal backups, updated it, and started scheduling training sessions. I personally called every employee in a quality-related role and explained what was required and why it mattered. I reconstructed the document control system, implementing new procedures that made it impossible for documents to fall out of compliance without multiple people noticing. I established a new supplier management program with clear audit schedules and accountability measures. I worked with calibration labs to get all manufacturing equipment recertified and set up automated reminders for future calibrations. I worked 60 and 70-hour weeks, but this time it was different. This time I had authority. This time I had recognition. This time I was doing it because I chose to, not because I was desperately trying to prove my worth to a manager who saw me as a threat. I brought Jennifer onto my team as training coordinator. She had been terrified she would lose her job when the company shut down, and I wanted her to know that speaking up late was better than never speaking up at all. She proved herself through dedication and hard work, and I was glad to have her. I discovered that several other employees had tried to warn the board about Derek over the years. They had sent emails expressing concerns about his treatment of staff, his lack of understanding of quality requirements, his tendency to blame others for his failures. But those emails had been ignored or dismissed as personality conflicts. I implemented new policies, ensuring that employee concerns reached the board directly through an anonymous reporting system managed by an outside firm. No one would be able to bury complaints again. 60 days into my tenure, Patricia returned for the re-audit. She spent 3 days at the facility, reviewing everything we had rebuilt. I walked her through each system, showed her the documentation, demonstrated the training we had completed. On the afternoon of the 3rd day, Patricia closed her binder and looked at me across the conference room table. "Audra, what you've accomplished in 2 months is remarkable. I've been doing this for 15 years, and I've never seen a company recover from this level of failure this quickly. Your systems are not just compliant, they're exemplary. I'm recommending immediate reinstatement of your certification." I felt tears in my eyes, but I blinked them back. This was not just about certification. This was about proving that good work matters, that integrity matters, that you can rebuild from destruction if you refuse to give up. The board held an all-company meeting the next day to announce the certification reinstatement. Gregory spoke first, explaining what had happened and how close they had come to permanent closure. Then he invited me to speak. I stood in front of 150 employees and told them the truth. I explained what had happened to me, how Derek had tried to destroy my career, and why I had chosen to come back. I told them that I came back not because the company deserved it, but because they deserved it. The people who had done nothing wrong deserved to keep their jobs and their livelihoods. The room was silent for a moment. Then someone started clapping. Within seconds, the entire company was on their feet, giving me a standing ovation. Jennifer was crying. Several people were crying. I felt the weight of the last 4 months lifting. After the meeting, employees came up to me one by one to thank me. Some apologized for not speaking up when I was fired. Some shared their own stories of feeling silenced or afraid. Some just wanted to shake my hand and tell me they were glad I was there. Gregory and the board had learned their lesson. They understood now that ignoring warnings and blindly trusting management creates toxic environments where good people get hurt. They implemented quarterly check-ins with employees at all levels. They brought in consultants to assess company culture. They made it clear that ethical leadership was not optional. Jennifer learned that silence in the face of wrongdoing makes you complicit. She became one of the strongest voices on my team, never afraid to question a decision or raise a concern. She told me once that watching what happened to me changed her understanding of what courage means. Carol, the former HR director, sent me a letter after she left the company. She wrote that she had spent 20 years following rules without questioning whether the rules were right. She said she should have investigated my termination instead of just processing paperwork. She was working with a different company now, and trying to be the kind of HR professional who protects employees instead of just protecting management. And Derek? He faced multiple lawsuits. MedTech Solutions sued him for fraud and breach of fiduciary duty. 2 of the other employees he had wronged filed defamation suits. His reputation in the medical device industry was destroyed. The professional network that he had spent years building wanted nothing to do with him. More importantly, Derek learned what happens when ego and cruelty catch up with you. When you build a career on tearing others down instead of building them up, eventually the foundation collapses beneath you. 6 months after returning to MedTech Solutions, I sat in my office with the vice president nameplate on my door. The office was larger than my old cubicle, with windows overlooking the manufacturing floor. I could see the production lines running smoothly, quality checkpoints working exactly as they should, employees following procedures I had written. I was reviewing the quarterly training report. Every single employee in a quality-related role had completed their required hours. Actually, most had exceeded the requirements. The culture had shifted. People understood now that continuing education was not busy work. It was investment in their own skills and the company's success. My phone buzzed with a text from Thomas, the former colleague who had warned me about Derek. Just saw the industry newsletter. Congratulations on the ISO Excellence Award. You've rebuilt that place better than it ever was. Proud to know you. I smiled. The certification body had recognized MedTech Solutions for quality management excellence, specifically citing the comprehensive training program and the robust speak-up culture. It was validation that the last 6 months of intense work had been worth it. Another message came through. This one from Sandra at Biomed Innovations. Saw the award announcement. If you ever want to make a move, the door's still open. But I'm guessing you're pretty happy where you are. I was happy. Not in the simple, uncomplicated way I had been 3 years ago when I first started at MedTech, but in a deeper, more mature way. I was happy because I had faced the worst kind of professional betrayal and had come out stronger. I had learned that justice does not always come quickly or easily, but when you stand firm in your truth and your value, vindication is sweeter than revenge ever could be. I had learned about the importance of speaking up. For 3 years, I had quietly done excellent work, assuming that competence alone would protect me. I learned that you must also advocate for yourself, build visibility, create allies at higher levels, and document your contributions. Excellence matters, but it cannot exist in silence. I learned about forgiveness, though not in the way people often mean that word. I did not forgive Derek. His actions were deliberate and cruel, and he deserved every consequence he faced. But I did forgive the company and the colleagues who failed me through cowardice or ignorance rather than malice. People can change when they understand the real cost of their failures. Most importantly, I learned about agency. When I was fired, I felt powerless. I felt like my career and my future had been taken from me by forces I could not control. But over these months, I realized that I always had more power than I thought. The power to tell the truth, the power to stand firm in my principles, the power to choose whether to help or walk away, the power to rebuild. Choosing to come back was not weakness. It was not about being a martyr or letting them off easy. It was about choosing my own power and agency over victimhood. It was about refusing to let Derek's actions define the rest of my career. I closed my laptop and headed down to the manufacturing floor. This was something Derek never did. He saw the production workers as beneath him, unworthy of his attention. I made it a point to spend time on the floor every week, talking with the people who actually made the products that kept the company running. Marcus from shipping called out to me. "Hey, Audra, got a minute? I have a question about the new packaging procedure." I walked over and we talked through the procedure together. He had caught a potential issue that I had not considered, and I thanked him for raising it. We revised the procedure right there, and I made a note to update the official documentation. This was what leadership looked like. Not sitting in an office issuing directives, but being present, being accessible, listening to the people doing the actual work, building systems that empowered everyone to speak up when they saw problems. Linda from receiving waved at me as I passed her station. "Thanks for approving my training request. I'm excited about the Advanced Quality Techniques course. You're going to be great at it. Let me know what you learn. We might be able to implement some of those techniques here. These small interactions, these moments of mutual respect and collaboration. This was what a healthy workplace felt like. This was what I had rebuilt, not just quality systems and compliance documents, but a culture where people felt valued and heard. As I walked back to my office, I thought about the question I ask myself regularly now. What would I tell my past self? The 25-year-old who walked into this building 3.5 years ago, excited and naive about the career ahead of her? I would tell her that doing excellent work is necessary, but not sufficient. You must also build relationships, create visibility, document your contributions, and never assume that your work will speak for itself. Because sometimes excellent work threatens people who are less competent, and they will try to destroy you rather than admit their own inadequacies. I would tell her to trust her instincts. If something feels wrong, if a manager's behavior seems toxic, if you see warning signs, do not ignore them. Document everything. Build connections outside your immediate chain of command. Create a network that can vouch for you if someone tries to destroy your reputation. I would tell her that surviving professional betrayal is possible, but it requires you to stand firm in your truth even when everyone else is doubting you. It requires you to keep showing up, keep doing the work, keep believing in your own value even when the world is telling you you're worthless. And I would tell her that choosing to help people who failed you is not weakness if you do it from a position of power rather than desperation. Sometimes, the most revolutionary act is refusing to let someone else's cruelty make you cruel in return. The sun was setting as I finished up my work for the day. I had dinner plans with Jennifer and a few other colleagues. We had become genuine friends over these months, bonded by shared experience and mutual respect. As I locked my office and headed to the parking lot, I felt something I had not felt in a long time. Peace, not the absence of challenge or difficulty, but the deep satisfaction of knowing I had faced the worst and had chosen to be better rather than bitter. My career was stronger than it had been before the crisis. My skills were sharper. My understanding of organizational dynamics was deeper. My sense of my own worth was unshakable now, built not on praise or titles but on the knowledge that I had rebuilt something meaningful from ruins. Derek had tried to destroy me, but all he had really done was force me to discover how strong I actually was, and that was a gift, though certainly not the one he intended to give. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever faced a situation where someone tried to sabotage your career or reputation? How did you handle it? What did you learn from the experience? Share your story in the comments below. I read every comment, and I think we can all learn from each other's experiences with workplace challenges and triumph. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to hear more stories about overcoming workplace adversity and finding your power in difficult situations. Share this with anyone who might be facing a similar challenge. Sometimes knowing that others have survived and thrived makes all the difference when you are in the middle of your own struggle. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it reminds you that setbacks are not endings, that justice sometimes takes time but does arrive, and that your worth is not determined by one person's opinion or one company's decision. Keep standing in your truth, keep doing excellent work, and keep believing in your own value. You are stronger than you know.